G'day, May 40 here. So the smartest people in politics, right, the smartest pollsters and journalists tell us this is a 50-50 election. That's what Nate Silver says. I'm not as smart as Nate Silver. I don't know as much statistics as Nate Silver. I don't know as much math and probability. Don't think I know as much about politics as Nate Silver. He has a ton more experience in this field than me. So why the heck would I have any confidence in a Donald Trump victory when people who are smarter and more experienced and more expert than myself say the race is 50-50? And the answer is I have to be right. I have to have a common sense approach to life that consistently yields more accurate results than many smart academic theories. So what makes Steve Saylor a great analyst and commentator is that when his first-hand experiences don't match up with some academic study, right, he dives into the data to try to figure out what's going on. And I guess that's what I do too. Right? When the experts are saying one thing and my own life experience says another, I don't automatically side with the experts and I don't automatically side with my own life experience. I look for some likely explanation for why the expert consensus is different from my consensus. So when I look at the early voting totals and how Republicans are doing so much better with early voting than they've ever done previously, right, I just don't see how Democrats can make up the difference on election day. It's such a simple analysis that I've got. Now, why might people who are smarter and more experienced than me, right, not see such a blindingly obvious fact? And one answer is that they know more than me, and so they have various explanations and various theories and various heaps of evidence about why this race is much closer than it appears. And we'll have a big post-mortem and we'll try to learn from it. So one of my favorite sources of information is the platform X, and there's a lot on X about voting machines breaking down in red communities and allegations of voting machines changing votes from Donald Trump to Kamala. And I'm not an expert in voting fraud, right? I've read a few books on it, read a few academic studies. So I don't know what to make of all these allegations about massive amounts of voting irregularities. And so here, as in many areas, I have to wait until I hear expert accounts, right? I'm not going to just side with anecdotal evidence that the voting's rigged, that there are irregularities, right? I need to read expert commentary. Then when I read the commentary of various experts, then I can put that together and try to figure out what makes the most sense. Because often when I read the expert analysis, I can spot massive errors in judgment. For example, if you're on the left, you believe that human nature is basically good. And as someone who's traditionalist, right, I recognize that human nature is not basically good. And so when people are making default judgments based on an assumption that human nature is basically good, then I can quickly spot the flaw in that argumentation. If people overweight the value of rationality, which is very common, so out of the three things that influence us, our genes, our environment, and the power of our reason. Out of those three factors, the evidence is overwhelming that reason is the weakest. And so I notice that most political commentary treats people as though they are basically good and that they have the power to direct their choices through the autonomous, strategic, buffered, reflexive use of reason. And that if the people don't go along with the way the expert sees the political choice, that's because they are lacking rationality, that they are falling for demagoguery. And I have another founding assumption that makes it a lot easier to get clarity in life. And that is, people did not evolve to be gullible. And so when I encounter expert analysis from people like Jonathan Alter that Trump voters are getting sucked in by demagogues, then I recognize that's bogus. Right? It's just an easy way out instead of grappling with the real reasons why people are attracted to Donald Trump. Right? It is so easy to just dismiss people for being gullible, or the silly right-wing explanation is demons. Right? Why do people have a different politics from me? Demons. Why do people have a different hero system from me? Demonic possession. Why are our institutions dominated by people with a different hero system from mine? Demons. Why is the world not operating as I would like it to operate? Demons. Why did I get screwed over at work? Demons. Why did I make a bad choice last year? Demons. Right, so the explanation of demonic possession, the devil, is to me a ludicrous one, akin to the liberal commentariat supposition that people are gullible and just incredibly susceptible to demagoguery. And I think both of these explanations fall short. They're unwilling to wrestle with what's really going on. So how severe are these election irregularities? I need to see reports from people with expertise in voting fraud. Right? For people who have devoted years of their life and who have a stellar track record. Right? Let me see what they have to say, how they explain many of the posts that are showing up on X. Because many of the posts charging voting irregularities and voting fraud don't seem terribly compelling to me. It seems like they're either manufactured to produce chaos, or they're just an unthought through response when reality doesn't go the way you want. For example, I just got a new iPhone, got iPhone 16, and can't get it to sync with the iTunes on my computer. Right? I lay down this morning, haven't been sleeping well the last few nights, so I thought, let me just have a nice, easy meditation. And when I transferred phones, somehow a lot of my data and my meditation recordings not on my new phone. So I'm trying to sync them from my iTunes, and I can't get it to sync. And if I go for the explanation as demonic possession, it's demons that are preventing my iTunes syncing with my iPhone. Right? That's not going to get me anywhere. And if I go with the explanation that, Apple is evil, they just want to screw me over, the elites want to make my life difficult, I'm being persecuted, right? That's not going to get me anywhere. Right? A calm Google search of the problem, trying various solutions, uninstalling iTunes, reinstalling iTunes, logging in, logging out. All sorts of problems and challenges when you start up your new iPhone. Oh my God, logging into Facebook on my new iPhone, it took like 15 minutes. Like so many different times. I had to enter in my old password, new password, get Facebook on some other device to accept this was me. And I often use Facebook to then log into other apps. So I'm a reasonably smart bloke. I mean, how do 100 IQ people navigate these challenges? I guess it's one reason why so many people are listening on their phones without using earphones. Incredibly obnoxious. All right, you're walking around in public, you're on a bus or a train, and you've got your phone blaring because you can't figure out how to pair your earbuds. One prescient analysis of this election by one observer who's left of center says that the election basically comes down to people who are pro-institution versus skeptical of institutions. And so if you're in the professions, doctor, lawyer, dentist, accountant, if you're a professor, if you essentially side with our institutions, then you're much more likely to vote for the Democratic Party. If you think our major institutions are corrupt, then you're much more likely to vote for Donald Trump. So there remains a huge FU. We're going to throw this chaos monster into the mix and disrupt the way that our institutions are operating. And I'm not pro or anti our institutions. I recognize that overwhelmingly they're operated by people with a different hero system than mine. So I guess I'm institution skeptical, but I'm also equally skeptical that that we should dismiss or instinctively loathe our institutions. Yeah, they're dominated by people with a different politics than mine. They're susceptible to all the human weaknesses and blind spots that come when you have one hero system. So yeah, it just placed me in the skeptical of the institutions and skeptical of those who are reflexively anti-institution. Mark Halperin said in the morning meeting that all sorts of Republican political operatives have been emailing him their electoral map projections, but not one Democrat has. So David Plouffe, Democrat political operative, is going on TV talking about how Kamala's going to win. But the read from Mark Halperin and the other blokes on the morning show is that this isn't a confidence that comes from data. It's a willed confidence. It's putting a best face on things. So there was a lot of talk after Trump won in 2016 whether there will be a realignment in the news media to figure out how they got things so wrong. So 8 years ago, I think Polymarket had Hillary Clinton as a 90% favorite to win. There's not one academic specializing in American studies in Australia, for example, who predicted that Donald Trump would win. And the New York Times, there was a lot of crying in the newsroom 2016. And I know a lot of lefties are just going to be devastated if Trump wins. But will it provoke more introspection on the part of the news media? They did introspect after the 2016 Trump victory, but the lesson they took away from it was that they shouldn't have reported so much on the damaging WikiLeaks releases of DNC, Democratic National Committee, emails from Jim Podesta's account. That news media felt, we allowed ourselves to get manipulated, and so that's why the news media was so reluctant to report on the Hunter Biden laptop story. And the news media engaged in tremendous introspection after 2016, but it was introspection on what did we do that allowed a Donald Trump victory. And I was just reading a piece by Justin Peters in Slate magazine. He's a thoughtful guy on the left, and he says that the news media has been relying on fact checkers to stop Donald Trump. But this view that fact-checking Donald Trump is going to defeat Donald Trump is naive because it relies on this liberal Enlightenment view of human nature. People are basically good and that people are profoundly rational. So if you just point out the facts to people, then they'll come around and they'll make more rational, reasonable choices. And we don't love our friends, we don't love our family, and we don't love our spouses because they can withstand a fact check, right? We love people, right, for many reasons that we don't even have clarity on, and we hate people for reasons that we don't necessarily have clarity on. It's not necessarily primarily a matter of reason, and we have political leanings that are not dependent on a fact check, right? Our cognitive function emerges out of the body, and so we have all sorts of pre-cognitive leanings. And there's no reason that our inclinations prior to the rational process are inferior to the rational process, because we evolved them for a reason, right? They serve us. Right? We evolved to survive. We didn't evolve to be happy, right? But evolution has put a priority on survival and reproduction. And so we have high rates of anxiety because people with lower rates of anxiety were much more likely to die out and to not take adequate care to minimize risks and dangers. So we didn't evolve with the right amount of anxiety to optimize our happiness, but we evolved to be in the ballpark of the right amount of anxiety to optimize our survival. All right, let's go to the chat. The circadian rhythm of your iPhone is off. I don't know how you can look at American institutions and not see the corruption. True, but which other country has institutions that are less corrupt? Yeah, amazing to see how many new Trump voters come out whose main motivation is to annoy the news media, says Elliot Blatt. Yeah, that's a persistent theme on Mark Halperin's show, but it's probably not a representative sample, because the people seeking out the Mark Halperin show, they're not seeking out Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, right? They are people who are disaffected with the mainstream news media. But when narratives become too pious, right, you feel like there's something tricky going on, something manipulative going on, something unreal. And so we often have a sense of reality that precedes our ability to think it through and to put it into words and to use all the powers of our reason. But we'll meet someone and our sense will just go off, this person is dangerous, right? We'll get into a situation and we'll just sense, this is a dangerous situation. And we cannot rationally state why this is a dangerous situation. And you could have all these brilliant liberal media types telling you that it's racist to flee this situation, that it's sexist, that it's Islamophobic, it's homophobic, it's nativist, it's nationalist, it's primitive, it's regressive, it's reactionary to flee a particular situation. And you can't articulate exactly why you want to flee from a certain situation. But we evolved that sense to benefit our survival. And if Donald Trump is elected, it'll be in large part because voting Americans sense that they want to flee the current situation, that they want to change, that they are not safe, that things are not arranged for their survival. So I've noted over the last month I've received so many positive greetings and interactions from people based on my wearing a yarmulke. So normally when Israel's fighting some war, I get a lot of anti-Jewish, anti-Israel reactions. But over the past month, I got a lot of positive interactions, and I want to evaluate the data and my personal experience. And academic studies and the data tell us that we have more trust of people who are in organized religion than people who don't, and that we have more trust in people who believe in objective morality than people who do not. And so I think when many people see an Orthodox Jew, they see someone who is highly committed to his religion and highly committed to standards of objective morality, and therefore more likely to be trustworthy. Now, from my own life experience, there are areas of life where many Orthodox Jews are highly trustworthy. All right, if you're going to be interacting with someone in the same community on a regular basis, you're highly unlikely to rip them off. But my overall pronouncement is that in America today, there's not much difference in the morality between religious people and non-religious. I'm not sure how that would be empirically validated. But certainly people, regular people, according to data and according to my own real life experience, they do think those who believe in God, believe in religion, practice a religion, are outwardly religious, have a high commitment to a religion, are more likely to behave in a moral fashion. That's why people signal, because we rely on signals to get a quick read on people. And so why would someone outwardly wear some religious insignia? Because in a multicultural society like America, or in a monocultural society like Australia, that comes with a huge price. In Australia, there's one dominant culture, and if you outwardly manifest your religion, you are stepping outside the one dominant culture. You are disrupting the continuity and cohesion of things. And then in a multicultural society, if you're outwardly religious, all right, you're very likely to tick off significant members of the population who are at war or who feel repulsed by what you stand up for. For example, if you're really into your gay identity, it would rationally make sense that if you strongly identify as gay, that you loathe organ on man's sex is a big sin. So I wonder if sometimes I'm way too cynical about religion. Perhaps I've overreacted. I'm somewhat of an enthusiast. I get highly enthusiastic about one thing for weeks, months, and years, and then drop it. So in my 20s, into my 30s, I became highly enthusiastic about Judaism as an embodiment of ethical monotheism, that there's one God, one moral standard for all of humanity. Judaism's the best system for morally improving people. Then I convert to Judaism, convert to Orthodox Judaism, and I find that the moral standard of behavior is in many ways not much superior, if at all superior, to secular people. And so there's probably some disillusionment there. And then as a result, I've become overly cynical. Cynical people are usually believers, lovers who've gotten hurt. For example, what type of people become womanizers, right? They're usually people who idealize women at one point and were really kind and nurturing and towards them and put them on a pedestal, and women reacted often with disgust. And so men learned through pain that this was a lousy way to approach women. And so they learned their lessons, they became much more effective with women, developed a certain cynicism and hardness, and became womanizers as a compensation for all their humiliation and failure at the hands of women. And I think I have often put way too much stock in religion. I think I did in my 20s into my 30s because I was looking for a magic key to life. I was looking for one thing that would make my life much better and enable me to get a handle on my self-destructive impulses, that if I simply aligned myself with this good moral system of Orthodox Judaism, that I would then become a good moral person. And it didn't work out for me because I had these pre-existing conditions that defied my religiosity. So my ADHD led to all sorts of emotional addictions, including sexual compulsion, excitement addiction, attention seeking. And so in my 20s into my 30s, I put way too much weight on religion to try to deal with things that were chemical in nature, the ADHD, that got under control when I got on medication. And then I entered recovery, 12-step programs, 12 years before I got treated for ADHD. So I don't know to what extent my recovery begins and the medication ends. But the great weight and value that I put on religion in my 20s into my early 30s, once I got into my mid-40s and later, I transferred that value to 12-step programs because it just empirically worked better. Like 12-step programs more effectively helped me get a handle on my emotional compulsions, self-destructive behavior. And 12-step programs more effectively enabled me to feel clean. I put a great value on feeling clean. And so what the hell is feeling clean? So for me, it's when I lead a life that I don't hate, when I lead a life that I'm not ashamed of, where I don't feel like I'm letting down myself or the people around me. So if I'm doing things that I don't want to be doing, right? If I overeat, I don't feel clean. If I were to look at pornography, I would not feel clean. If I were to unnecessarily inject sex or some shocking topic into a conversation where it's inappropriate and it came at a harm to the people around me, right? If I start insulting, shocking, provoking, and offending people for no good reason because I want their attention, right? I wouldn't feel clean afterwards. I noticed that I was disturbing people. For example, I don't use a gimbal on my iPhone because even though it would produce a much steadier picture, right, other people around me are bothered when they see someone walking around, with a gimbal attached to their iPhone. So you're just walking residential streets and you've got your iPhone attached to a gimbal. I notice a lot of people shying away. It disturbs them, as opposed to I just walk around with my iPhone held in my hand and no one has any idea what's going on. It's not disturbing. It just looks like I'm carrying on a telephone conversation. And so if I was walking down a residential street at 6 a.m. doing a live stream, I would take care to modulate my voice so that it didn't wake up and bother the people around me. Right? if I were, wearing clothing that unnecessarily offended and bothered the people around me, I would not feel clean after that. If I weren't paying my bills, if I failed to live up to my responsibilities, if I wasn't being honest and forthright with the people in my life, if people were feeling let down by me because I wasn't following through on my commitments, then I would not feel clean. If I were wasting vast amounts of time, particularly time in the morning, which is usually when I'm at my most cognitively sharp, right? I would not feel clean about that, right? If I started the day watching a movie or a TV show, I would not feel clean, right? I want to start my day by living up to my responsibilities and engaging in my religious responsibilities, spiritual responsibilities, recovery responsibilities, taking care of my health, doing the exercises and tension release exercises that I need to do so that I can be my best for the day ahead. So feeling clean, number one priority for me, and I found that I'm better able to feel clean through getting on the appropriate medication for my ADHD and following through on various 12-step practices, including sponsoring. And so I probably reacted with some unnecessary cynicism about the effect of religion on morality, given how badly I failed when I tried to use religion to overcome my own destructive impulses. I'm just often pleasantly surprised when I encounter people who just have this instinctive reverence and appreciation for Orthodox Jews, because I largely live around Orthodox Jews and we're very much a mixed bag. Right? When I think about the Orthodox Jews I know, reverent would be an appropriate response to maybe 10% of them. All right, let's go to the chat. Voted for Trump to annoy the left. I voted for the felon and the hillbilly. Has a Republican presidential campaign ever gone as far as this one has in explicitly supporting the normalization of objectively abnormal, unwholesome behavior such as the LGBT part? I don't think so. The assertion that same-sex union is the equivalent to heterosexual union is objectively manifestly false. One need not, God bless America. So that's a beautiful statement, God bless America, but what do we as Americans need to do to earn God's blessing? What time will I be starting my election coverage? Probably 5 p.m. on the West Coast. We all live in our own bubble. Prepare yourself for the outcome. God is in control. Amen, amen. Yeah. Yeah, it really shouldn't matter that much to the if you're on this chat, right? Elections matter because it's a hobby. It's a passionate interest. It's a form of intellectual, social engagement. Just as some people are highly engaged in yoga or in playing basketball or in playing chess. So, if Trump loses, what would be the reason? Okay, so if there is a large turnout disparity in favor of women, so in the 54% range, which would be unheard of in an American presidential election. We've never had an American presidential election where the female vote was 54%. So I'm expecting a female vote in the 52% range. And early vote indicates that the female vote is down considerably in the battleground states compared to 2016. The urban vote is down considerably compared to 2020, and the urban vote is down considerably in 2020. So I just don't see any evidence in the early vote that Kamala Harris is turning out the key constituencies that she needs to win. And I just don't see any reason to believe that they're just going to all turn out on election day. Megyn Kelly, that was good to see her on Donald Trump's rally. She has been a pleasant surprise. I really enjoy her show. And the Ruthless podcast. I think my consumption of YouTube and podcasts has become more partisan and more political focused over the past few months. And so I look forward to having more eclectic interests and trying to open up my mind to more diverse perspectives. So it's painful and shocking and uncomfortable when I listen to a wider range of voices. So I think I'm guilty of choosing to live in a bubble with regard to political commentary and my podcast and YouTube consumption over the past few months. So if there are reasons why my ability to discern reality with regard to the election are better than people who are smarter and more accomplished and have more expertise than me, is because I've got some basic facts of life down that they don't. 1, people are not basically good. 2, people are not dominantly controlled by their reason. 3, recognizing the controlling power of the situation. So very shortly after Joe Biden's disastrous performance on June 27th in his debate with Donald Trump, I said that which cannot continue will not continue. It is simply impossible for Joe Biden to continue his campaign. Now, I admit I'll also said it seems to me impossible that the Democrats just automatically appoint Kamala Harris. So I was wrong in that regard. But I clearly saw that Joe Biden could not continue in the race. And so some of my rules for life, right, if they are superior to elite assumptions, elite enlightenment, liberal, buffered, reflexive, autonomous, strategic, rational, individualist focused perspective of the liberal elite. So if my default assumptions are closer to reality, then a bloke like me with just over an average IQ and fair amount of self-taught knowledge about politics, right, will see things more clearly than those with higher IQs and more expertise if I get the basics down. So, for example, when IranContra first emerged on the scene, I think in 1986, I immediately sensed that this was different from other potential scandals for President Reagan, and that it would not just bounce off him like other potential scandals had done. While my political science professor says, this is the Teflon president, it would just bounce off him. So for some reason, I recognized in that situation something that people who were more intelligent and more educated did not recognize, that this was a scandal that he would not just sail through. When the movie Flashdance came out, right, I felt something. This is going to be a hit. I couldn't write a movie review that made a lot of sense, but I had an experience watching Flashdance that convinced me that this was going to be a huge hit. And when I first watched a Donald Trump rally in July of 2015. Right, I experienced something that made me realize he was tapping into something primal in the American psyche. This was not just another politician. So sometimes we have what's called the spidey sense or intuition, or a feeling that goes before our rational faculties that will better help us navigate reality than all the power of reason, IQ, and academic research. Now, ideally, when that happens, and if you have the luxury of time, right, you study the research, you study the data, and then you try to figure out why your sense of things is different from the data, and where you might have different default assumptions than the experts. And then you can have a useful back and forth, a useful dialogue with those who see the situation differently, and you'll be able to discern the foundational principles that differ between you and those with the expertise. And so you can recognize, these really smart people with all this expertise, right? They came to a completely different conclusion than me, because I begin with the principle that people aren't basically good, that people are not primarily dominated by the reason, that people did not evolve to be gullible, that people are inherently tribal, that nationalism is the strongest political force in the world, that almost nobody cares about outgroups, that we tend to feel more comfortable around people who are similar to ourselves. Megan Kelly is a master of optics. Yeah, she looks good. She's in her 50s. And she puts on a consistently compelling show. This country doesn't just belong to decent people. Everyone is entitled to freedom and representation. Well, this is just a matter of competing hero systems. All right? So not everyone who's a citizen of America is going to feel like your fellow American. And people on the right generally going to have a more tribal and nationalistic approach to group identity, while people on the left have leapfrogging loyalties. So for people on the right, they have concentric circles of loyalty, beginning with yourself, your family, your extended family, your friends, your community, and moving outward to your city and your state and your nation. While people on the left, right, their number one priority might be the LGBT community in Kenya, and then their mother, and then some oppressed group in New York City. Right, the loyalties leapfrog all over the place. I remember I was getting interviewed in something like January of 2007, and the interviewer mentioned to me that the mayor of Los Angeles hadn't been wearing his wedding ring for 6-8 months, and that immediately struck me as a story. So none of the experts, right, none of the political reporters, none of the people whose full-time job it was to cover the mayor thought this was a story, but I did. The reason they didn't think it was a story was, one, they had a liberal bias. The mayor was a liberal, a Democrat. Second, he was a member of a protected group. He was Latino. He was LA's first Latino mayor. These media felt it was long overdue that a majority of Latino population centers such as Los Angeles should have a Latino mayor. And second, it felt grubby and tabloid-like to investigate the mayor's private life. And it was just not part of their culture of careful critical discourse So because I was willing to go into what was grubby and what was not politically correct, I was able to break a story that all the experts had completely ignored, but then I forced them to cover a story. And other scandals in the Jewish community with like rabbis who'd been serial predators and yet retained their position at major synagogues. When I finally broke the story that other people regarded as too grubby and too disturbing, right, then it set off reactions that led to rabbis stepping down from their pulpit position and never likely to hold a pulpit position again. So if you're willing to go where other people won't go, so I mean that's what Steve Saylor does. Right? He focuses on matters of race and IQ and all sorts of politically incorrect areas that other commentators just won't go. He's looking for a comparative advantage. That's a model for me. That's what I try to do. Try to look for a comparative advantage. Talk to you blokes later. Bye-bye.